It's Oscars weekend, Madison.
The award show from the industry, for the industry, but sold to you and me?
Something like that. This week on the podcast, we're talking about Oscar predictions. Also, stick around afterwards because we're going to discuss the first two episodes of Shōgun, an FX show that just dropped on Hulu last Wednesday. Enjoy. Well, Herschel Kissinger, welcome to the Indie Magazine podcast.
Hey, Tristan, thanks for having me.
Now, I know it's evening in London, morning in LA. I appreciate you hopping on. When did you first get into TV and movies?
I think I've always been a TV enthusiast. I grew up without cable television, and it became the same with me and my siblings, where when we were on a vacation, the most exciting part of the trip wasn't that we were going to go to a theme park or the beach. It's that our hotel room would have cable and we could watch like Disney Channel or later on syndicated comedies. I think that I've been into movies, but what really got me into keeping up with all the movies, like trying to stay abreast of the movies that are in the awards conversation, really was Paul, my partner, who has been a film enthusiast himself. He has lived in London and grew up by a bunch of the film studios out in the suburbs. So he was a movie extra in things like the Harry Potter movies, some action movies. And then I think from that, he just sort of remained interested in films. And through osmosis, I became just as interested in what's out, who the interesting directors are, who the sort of surprising new voices are, and then tracking the award season. And it's been interesting too, just watching it through a London lens of a lot of the films that are Oscar contenders now are released differently here, or I had the chance to see them through the London Film Festival, which is open to the public so anyone can go. So the timing of when movies pop into the conversation is very different from when I am able to see them. Some of them I'm seeing way before, and some of them I have to wait like so long to see because they aren't released in the UK until, there's a couple of them that if I hadn't gone home for Christmas and caught up on them, I would still be like scrambling for a way to see them. So I think that's just been sort of an interesting wrinkle to the awards conversation this year.
Yeah, I remember when I was over there, the same thing of movies. My friends were like, how have you not seen this? And this was like, well, it's not coming out until next March or next April here in the UK, or other movies you saw way earlier than everybody else. And as far as your job and career, I know you've been a writer. Have you written about entertainment before?
I work in like the PR ad space and have dabbled in writing longer form stuff, done some stand up, and all of that has just given me like a really deep appreciation of every time a movie gets made. It is hours and hours of blood, sweat, and tears and years of development. And I think that because of that, I never have like super negative. I feel like my bar for what makes a film worth seeing is maybe lower than an average person's, because I have seen how much it takes and how many great stories just never make it to the screen because of roadblocks in the way. So I think because of that, like, I do appreciate film festivals, and I guess I have mixed feelings about award season, because I think that on one hand it elevates some of those things that maybe have a harder time attracting an audience, but then I also think that there can be almost a herd mentality where, especially with this season, I think that a lot of the races feel settled in a way that isn't really that exciting. And I don't know how I feel about this odd situation that these awards shows are in, where they feel that box office performance is a factor that needs to be awarded now. But it will definitely be interesting to see as how it sort of plays out and how it shapes sort of future conversations. Because I think the whole Barbenheimer debate and the snubs for Greta and Margot will definitely sort of shape how not only these films are marketed, but I think also like how these bigger box office films, like how they might mount their campaigns in the future.
Yeah, because I remember it was what 5, 6 years ago when they announced they were going to do a popular Oscar category, like a popular film,
Yeah.
and then immediately, doubled back and said, "Never mind, we're not going to do that." But to your point, it is a weird game, and I've always thought it was weird. Everything from the gift bags and the events, and then hearing anonymous comments from voters saying like, "Oh, well, Robert Downey Jr. said hi to me in an event, so now I have to vote." Just like a really weird game of what actually makes it in, what's going to make the contest, and what's going to pull ahead. Especially, and this kind of leads into our predictions. There's so many other award shows leading up. By the time you get here, you kind of know who's going to win, minus a couple upsets. Before we hop into our predictions, though, what's some memorable Oscar moments from shows you've watched or things you've tracked in the past that have stuck with you, other than the slap?
I think that for me, the slap, that's honestly like a repressed memory. I
Yep.
think that something that's been interesting to me is sort of like the notion of the whole like Oscars so white controversy and just how like the Oscars have treated performances from like underrepresented actors and underrepresented voices in writing and storytelling. Like I think about how, watching the clip of when Marlon Brando refused his Oscar and sent a Native American representative to speak on his behalf and how she got booed by the audience for sort of calling out the Oscars, and now looking at a potential Lily Gladstone win for Best Actress, like just like tracing that. And I think too with when Marlee Matlin won her Oscar for Children of a Lesser God, there was sort of like a controversy within the deaf community because I believe I have to go back and watch it, but I think that she had voiced her acceptance speech. She, instead of signing it, she had spoken it. And it had been controversial because the deaf community was like, we've waited so long for this representation, and now you're sort of playing by their rules and bending to their rules.
Yeah.
So then to see her, future co-star in Coda, Troy Kotsur, win and sign his speech was a nice bookend to that. But then also, the shame of not really seeing those actors again. I would be very happy if Lily Gladstone won. And what I hope, though, is that it's not the Oscars patting themselves on the back for sort of doing their social justice action of the day, and that it, the industry sort of recognizes it for what it is, which is like a well-deserved mark of talent. And that this is just the start of many more like award season appearances by actors like Lily.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to see where someone goes if they feel like an Oscar's patting themselves on the back. And I know with Lily, she's going to be in a couple TV things here or there, but it surprised me that she wasn't signed to like 5, 6, 7 different movie deals in this whole award season. Like you didn't hear about her signing for other parts. It was just kind of like, oh, she's done a couple more episodes of Reservation Dogs, or there's some new show Under the Bridge. But
yeah. But it's also like, I remember when Monique was like, when she won her Oscar for Precious, she had sort of gone out of her way to say like, I'm not going to do the song and dance of like an award season campaign. Like, I think that my performance speaks for itself. And if you want to reward it, you can reward it. And if you don't, like, I don't need to convince you, because all the convincing I need to do is on that screen.
Yeah.
And she won, but then she sort of said afterwards that way that she ran her campaign, which was essentially a non-campaign, she was like, that sort of blacklisted me, and I didn't really like get any future opportunities from that. So like, I do think that like what's a hard thing is that like a lot of, you look at people like Bradley Cooper, who feels like his life purpose isn't to act, it's to like campaign for an Oscar. I don't know. That to me, that's boring. I almost wish that there was a little bit more like rules around how that works and how it's considered. But then at the same coin, like, I don't necessarily think that the Oscars are rewarding the best film of the year. They are awarding the most Oscar worthy things. Like, there is like Oscar worthiness is a category in and of itself, separate from quality, because like quality is subjective. I love John Waters movies. I love Little Shop of Horrors. I love The Princess Diaries.
Mm-hmm.
And I genuinely love them. I unironically love them. And I know that those aren't Oscar movies, but
Yeah.
I also love Poor Things. And Poor Things is like my favorite movie of this award season. And I watched it like fully knowing that like maybe Emma Stone might get the Oscar, but I don't think that it really like has a strong chance of winning Best Picture.
Yeah.
But it's very unusual for the Best Picture of the year to be my favorite movie. But when I see the Best Picture, I feel like I can often say, okay, I think this is it.
Yeah, and there's the People's Choice Awards as well as all the other indie film awards, but there's no box office award season. And so when it comes down to it, you have people who love maybe just the big box office movies who feel shut out by the Oscars. I have a lot of friends like that who say what I love didn't make it in there. And so it comes down to an interesting game of this is for people in the industry, recognizing people in the industry with a bunch of politics in there. So it's definitely interesting to watch as a layperson who maybe doesn't have a foot in the industry or is not tuned into the award seasons because it's not usually for those people, right?
But then also, like, it is this sort of weird chicken egg situation because when everyone was talking about Greta and Margot being snubbed, and it was like, oh, it's like so sad that like
Yeah.
it's such a shame that they're not being rewarded. And I'm like, you know, I do think that Greta Gerwig, like, I think that Margot, I could go either way. Greta, I think the level of vision it took to realize Barbie the way that she did, like, I think is a feat of direction. And I think that she certainly deserved that Best Director nomination. But I also think, like, it's not like Barbie becomes unsuccessful because it wasn't nominated for these Oscars. The real mark of success for Barbie is its box office. And the fact that it
Yeah.
was a huge hit means it doesn't need the validation of the Oscars. And that's why I get a little bit confused. It just like feels like Oppenheimer is sort of a foregone conclusion to win so many of these awards. And
Yeah.
I don't understand like why everyone is in such alignment over that when it feels like they're catering to popular taste a little bit.
Mhm.
When like in my mind, part of the point of the Oscars is like to sort of give a little bit of a laurel to the movies that need it to sort of convince audiences that this is actually worth your time. Like this movie that you sort of have overlooked is the one that you need to like queue up next.
My friends brought up if they hadn't known that Parasite was a Best Picture winner, they wouldn't have watched it. You know, like that was the
Yeah.
thing that got them on a plane or at home streaming. That was the thing of, oh, it looks weird, but it's a Best Picture. I have to give it a watch. And to your
Yeah.
point, it'd be nice to have something that wasn't just, we all recognize Christopher Nolan. He made almost $1 billion at the box office.
Yeah.
He's got his award, right?
Yeah.
Well, on that note, let's start off with some of the categories. And I want you to talk about what you think will win and what you wish would win. Let's go to actor. So we have Bradley Cooper nominated for Maestro, Coleman Domingo for Rustin, Paul Giamatti for The Holdovers, Cillian Murphy for Oppenheimer, and Jeffrey Wright for American Fiction.
I think it's Killian's to lose. He did a very serviceable job. I think he's going to win. I think his performance was good enough. And he did have to center a very sort of complex movie. I really have a soft spot for Paul Giamatti's performance in The Holdovers. I think that that was just such like a fully realized character that just like felt so like real and lived in and funny and iconic. Like I now could like tell a story about this character because I know everything I need to know about him from this performance where everything just contained so many like notes and I really appreciated it. So of the nominees, I think that is probably the one that I wish would win. I do feel that Andrew Scott and All of Us Strangers is the one that I like wish was on the list. That's a movie that was like chemically grown in a lab to be like a movie that I like loved and recommend to everyone. I love Andrew Hyde's. It is such a sparse movie in terms of the number of characters and the interpretation. And I think that speaking of carrying a movie, Andrew Scott really makes that movie work in a way that I have a hard time imagining few other actors who could. And I think that that's where I think with Cillian Murphy, he's great in Oppenheimer, but I can imagine a lot of other actors who could have done that. And I think that that's often my benchmark for who I would give the Oscar to.
It's hard too because with Cillian Murphy, he was doing a good job, but to your point, it wasn't like he was playing some character that was super vivacious. So many of his scenes, at least to me, he was thinking and quiet and pensive or a little awkward. And that's kind of what Cillian Murphy does.
Yeah.
I have heard some rumblings, some podcasts and articles. I think Paul Giamatti will win. I honestly think
he
he
could
has
be
a
a
good shot.
spoiler.
He could be the spoiler, but the other spoiler I've heard is Jeffrey Wright. Did you see American Fiction?
Yeah, I think that was a really strong. I feel like his nomination is well deserved, and I definitely think that his performance is really strong. I don't know if he wins. I love an upset at the Oscars because I'm like, it's like makes it interesting, and it's like not fun watching an event show unfold as predicted. Yeah, I mean, I loved American Fiction. I loved how much side story there was, which I think is part of the point of the story is that, it's about how the Black experience can't be summed up in a single story. Like American Fiction offers so many different glimpses and perspectives on that through the supporting cast and characters. And I think that because of that, I could see getting an award in something more directly related to that sort of richness of the peripheral stories. So maybe in like the writing category, I could see it like having a better shot.
I mean, he's good, but standing up against some of the others, I do think it's difficult for him to win, but it would be a cool upset. Did you see Rustin, by the way?
I guess I technically saw Rustin. Like it was on. I think Rustin wasn't my movie. I'm not a biopic fan. I just don't find them that interesting. It takes a lot for a biopic to be my favorite movie of the year. And this one just didn't really hold my attention compared to it already had a hard job to do with me because I'm sour on the biopics. I think like something that I've seen is the nomination that he's getting for Rustin is sort of a joint nomination for his supporting performance in The Color Purple, which I could see. I actually don't know what other things I've seen him in, but it's good. Like,
yeah,
I didn't love Rustin, but I don't think that one has any shot of winning, to be honest.
That was one of my blind spots this year. I didn't see Rustin. I haven't watched Nyad yet. I'm gonna try and watch that for the weekend.
Yeah, biopics, man, they're just not. They're a tough sell for me, but the Oscars love them.
They sure do. If there's one performance I wish would have been recognized in some category, I was such a fan of the Iron Claw. I saw it twice, and I loved Zac Efron's performance. Even though it was subtle at points, I just loved that movie. And I don't think he would have won Best Actor, even if he was in this lineup. I get that part, but it's one of those moments of wishing there was some other way to nominate so people knew about the movie or wanted to go see it.
Yeah, I agree. I just think that it came out too late, like everywhere. I don't like it. Yeah. I don't know if they just didn't think that it was going to be an award. Like I don't know what the strategy was there. I had a hard time with the Iron Claw. I think it was just a little bit too like bleak for me, and I think that maybe that's what would have hurt his chances like in it is that it's just not. It is not. I mean, Coda won Best Picture 2 years ago. Like that's the kind of like if that's a Best Picture winner, like and I know that like Oppenheimer is like not necessarily like an uplifting movie either. Like, and I know that that's the front runner, but like I don't know, the Iron Claw, man, it's just depressing. Like it's a tough watch.
Yeah,
it's hard if you know anything about that family when like when the sort of first tragedy happens that it's just going to be tragedy from here on out.
Yeah, watching the second time and then my fiance sitting next to me and I had to be like, it gets worse. I had to prepare her like, oh no, it gets sadder. Like it's not going to go back up to a happy ending. It is difficult to watch,
but it is interesting because I think that like so much of what made Zac Efron's performance interesting is the preparation where he changed his body so dramatically. And it's like hard to sort of like evaluate, like it's not only like what's currently on the screen, it's like all that went in. And it's sort of a similar thing with like Nyad, I would say, even though Annette Bening didn't do like a complete, like, it's not like she's like ripped, totally ripped, but it is a very physically demanding performance. And it's just hard to know, okay, well, how hard is that? And how do you like evaluate that as opposed to the emotional performances?
Well, I guess that leads us into actress.
Yeah.
Do you think Annette Bening has a chance with Nyad, or will it go to like
I don't know. Like, I think that like I've heard about her is that she's sort of like very much like a Hollywood power player, and like her and Warren Beatty, I get the impression that they're just a very well regarded pair in the industry, and that this Oscar nomination is in some ways like a Meryl Streep in The Iron Lady, where sometimes you just have to like kiss the ring of this legend, regardless of how good this performance is. It's more about like their greater body of work. I thought that her performance in this is good. I think that Naiad is hurt a little bit by the controversy around the Naiad character. She's not the most lovable protagonist. She's like she has a spiky personality. And I know that there's been some controversy over the way that the real life swim from Cuba to Florida was verified, because the trip didn't have the level of supervision that I think the sort of official body officially requires to sort of count it. So it doesn't have like a tidy bow narrative of the backstory. And I think that all those things in a really crowded category make it hard to reward that performance. Like it's hard to reward that performance compared to Lily Gladstone, who is just really grounding this really sprawling epic story and doing it in representing, and she didn't ask to do this. It's not her fault that there's not the representation for Indigenous and Native American stories, but she kind of has to carry all in the absence of prestige awarded stories about Native peoples. She really does have to like carry that burden for so many voices, and it has to be that representation, which is an unfair for her. It's an unfair thing for her to do, but she has done it so gracefully and so stoically in her performance, and so emotionally, to hold your own with Leonardo DiCaprio and to be saying so little while you're doing it, I think is really impressive. So it's a quiet performance, but I think that it is really strong. And then on the other end of the spectrum, Emma Stone, man, I just think that that's a performance where, do I think other people could have done it? Yeah, I do. And I honestly think that there's a lot of actors who would have done that performance and would have gotten an Oscar nomination for it. But it is about the bravery of committing to it. It was just a very brave performance. I'm like, you are really making yourself look silly, look foolish. And it is weirdly, I don't think I've ever seen a movie with so much sex that is like, that I would not describe as a sexy movie. Poor Things is not sexy. It is not. You don't watch it and think like, oh, kinky. Oh, why don't we Netflix and chill with some Poor Things? Absolutely not. It's a movie that I would feel fine like watching with my parents in a weird way. But yeah, I mean, I loved it. It was my favorite movie of the year. So I would be very happy if Emma won as well, because I just think it was so fun to watch.
Yeah.
And it's so fun to watch somebody who, Emma Stone, who like doesn't have to sign up for that wild of a performance, just do it anyways.
It's funny to think of Emma Stone, La La Land years ago, to now Emma Stone playing what she played in Poor Things and going to that level with it.
And I'm not a big La La Land fan. Maybe if I went back and rewatched it, I would appreciate it more. I think I was just sort of bitter about like the Moonlight. I was a much bigger fan of Moonlight. But I don't know. Emma Stone has really like had a great year with Poor Things. And then I don't know if you've watched The Curse with her and
I haven't yet on Showtime.
It is wild. And it's another really, really daring performance from her where she's playing this very problematic white savior character. And I'm like, it's so funny that I remember when you were getting flack for playing somebody who was part Asian in Aloha, and to see your progression to sort of reconciling that in this really nuanced performance on that as well. So yeah, I think that would be good. I don't know if there's anyone who I think Margot, I don't know. I'm not losing sleep over Margot Robbie not getting nominated. I do think it's a little bit weird how the dice fall, how America Ferrera got nominated and Margot didn't. And Ryan Gosling, I'm not wowed by his performance either. I think that it's a silly movie, and the things that we love about Ryan Gosling's performance, I'm like, do you love that or do you love Greta Gerwig's direction of this? I think that it all goes back to Greta. Now with Margot, like, because I know she was a producer of the movie and made a lot of it happen, that's where I can sort of see her Best Actress, where you sort of produce this performance as well. But I don't know, that is above my pay grade and understanding of the Oscars. I love Sandra Huller and Anatomy of a Fall. And it was really interesting seeing her alongside the Zone of Interest performance, which I didn't really resonate with the Zone of Interest when it first came out. It's sort of grown on me. Well, I shouldn't say it's grown on me. It's not a movie that you really are supposed to like, I think.
Yeah.
But I saw Zone of Interest first, and then I saw Anatomy of a Fall, which I think is reverse of what a lot of other people have. So seeing her in Anatomy of a Fall, I think made me appreciate what she was doing in Zone of Interest a little bit more.
Yeah, same here. I saw it in the same order. Zone of Interest, I did not like. And the more time it's been, the more I think about it. I'm still disturbed by it or still thinking about it. So it must be good.
My opinion about Zone of Interest is I think Zone of Interest is something that if you're at like a museum, and you know how when you go to a museum and you wander into that weird room where the video is playing and you're like, I don't know at what, like, I'm like, I might be 30 minutes into this video. Maybe it just started. I have no idea. I don't really want to stick around and watch. I actually think that Zone of Interest is a movie where like you could sort of come in at any point in that movie, watch it for 15 minutes and leave with pretty much the same conclusion. Yeah. It is an atmospheric bath of ill will and bad feelings that really surrounds you. I mean, that is a testament to the cinematography and the sound and the acting, but for me, it just doesn't really function as a film, if that makes sense. Where there are elements of this I like, but I don't like as a like a film with a beginning and a middle and an end. I don't think that is where it excels. In a weird way, it's like really strong in its ability to like get its point across really quickly. So like maybe it should have been a short.
Yeah. And honestly, once you get the point of what's happening, just seeing the reality of everyday evil people, it just kind of drones on.
And I also think too that where I struggle with it is this idea of the banality of evil, like blah, 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 blah. Everyone keeps talking about this. And like, it is an interesting perspective that I haven't seen. And they're like, oh, it's so prescient for our times. But I also think that a question that I wish that it had pushed a little bit more with that mom character who visits and then sort of like can't hack it.
Yeah.
Like she can't stomach the visceral sounds, sights, and smells. Is what does it say about not the evil people in power, but like the vast majority of people who are sort of just indifferent to it, where it's like not the banality of evil, but like the indifference of evil. How do you reconcile, you know, potentially this evil thing happening that you might benefit from, or even if you don't benefit from it, like you are witness to it, but don't do anything about?
Yeah.
And that is a more interesting question to me. And I think that's a more timely question to me because of that. Like, I think that that's the sort of thread that they were pulling on with that visitor character, like somebody coming in from the outside and sort of like reacting to it all at once. But I wish that had maybe that would have been how I would have framed the story.
Yeah. A little more responsibility, I guess I'd say. Because you're right. I mean, I feel like sometimes it's just European filmmakers. They just love to leave open-ended question marks and shrugs of, well, do what you want with what we're going to leave here.
I actually haven't seen the movie of it and I need to. It's on my list, but I saw Cabaret, like the West End production of Cabaret, which is coming to Broadway actually, right around the same time that I saw Zone of Interest. And it's like all about that. Like it is all about the indifference of that we have to the sort of what happens when we don't want to pay attention to the sort of rise of an evil force, or like the sort of what happens when like darkness confronts people like in our orbit, but like doesn't, you know, it would require us putting skin in the game to like do something about it.
Yeah.
And there are images from Zone of Interest that like I think about a lot more, but Cabaret, honestly, I think in terms of World War II films is the one that I'm more interested in like discussing.
Yeah.
Or that story I'm more interested in discussing. And it's the one that I would be more likely to recommend.
Definitely. And that's why it's interesting that Sandra Hüller got nominated for Anatomy of a Fall, which is a better role too. But it does feel a little like a joint nomination. And although it's not perfect, like she gets a little more of a push
what
there.
I noticed with like Zone of Interest is that like the film is like shot in a way that like the sort of it deliberately foregrounds you in the concentration camp with like you always the smoke, the screams, it's never out of view. Like they always make sure that it's in. But I think that the one sort of challenge of that is that it means that there are so few scenes where you're really close in on the actors' faces. And I think that like that's like I don't think that it was ever really like a real awards contender. You just don't see her close up enough. Even though she's in so many of the scenes, you just don't get to see the sort of nuances that you do in Anatomy of a Fall.
You're right. Everything's a median shot. Everything's her talking to 2 or 3 different people. There's not anything introspective or blowing you away with her performance there.
Yeah.
And as far as the other nominees, Carey Mulligan, I don't think she'll win.
You know what? I did not. My hot take. This is my hot take. I thought that her performance in Saltburn and her performance in Maestro, I was like, it feels like you're doing like the same kind of acting in these movies, but it felt like so much more appropriately placed in Saltburn, where I'm like, there's just something that is so like, I don't know. It just felt like a little bit like like I was not big on Maestro. I think that like Maestro, I don't understand who the movie was for. I don't understand what the movie was really about. Like it felt like it was like, oh, this is really about like their marriage. And I'm like, it doesn't seem like it based on what you're focusing on.
No.
So maybe I'm too small-minded to truly appreciate it. I'm not really that like well-versed in Leonard Bernstein or his music, but like this movie did nothing to convince me. I was like, I don't even understand like what your style or approach to music is like based on this. I just feel like I didn't really learn anything about him other than that he like loved getting laid.
Yeah, that's what a lot of the reviews or things that I'd read beforehand were saying were, you get out of the movie and you go, I still don't know who he is, don't know anything about him other than it was just kind of vibes. You have 1 or 2 amazing scenes that we talked to the sound mixer a few weeks ago on here, and he talked about setting up 100 plus mics in the Ely Cathedral and in the UK and all these different things that were pretty amazing technically.
Yeah.
But as far as substance in the movie, I didn't get what Bradley was going for, and whatever he was on, great. And the more he's talked about it, the worse it sounds.
He's having like the opposite of a successful awards campaign because it just feels like I think the key to like campaigning for an Oscar and winning is that you have to act as if only after you finished filming did you realize like, oh, maybe I could have a chance at winning an Oscar. You can't go into it being like, I'm acting this so that I can get nominated for an Oscar, which just, that is what Maestro reeks of. It like reeks of like Bradley Cooper making a movie to be nominated for Oscars. Yeah. And I don't know if that's true or not, but like that's how the entire campaign is coming across. And it's how the movie feels when you watch it.
Which is hard because, the sound mixer guy talked about how genuine and kind and loving and just kind of like collaborative Bradley is. But then on the flip side, you hear about 6 years of learning to be a composer and the crazy stuff with home life and then believing he was going to be taken over by the spirit of Leonard Bernstein. You're like, okay, there's a different level here that we could respect, but it just comes off wrong.
Somebody was saying online, they were like, I would love to see Bradley Cooper direct a movie that he is not acting in.
Yeah.
Like, how would he be as a director if he wasn't directing himself? I don't know. Like, even in A Star Is Born, he is someone to me who, like, he never disappears into a role. Yeah. Or at least when he's directing himself, like, it's so obvious that it is him there. Like, no amount of prosthetics or grisly voice can hide that. So I would just be interested to see how he would do this if he wasn't the one doing the acting. Or maybe, I don't know. It is just like one of those things where it's like, I know that you can be like a multi-hyphenate actor-director, but I'm like, which do you really want to do? He does seem like more of an actor than a director to me.
Yeah, and people have talked about his vision on the sets and things. And I will say I liked Stars Born and I thought it was good. I don't think I've really sat down to rewatch it. Every time I talk about it, I'm like, I don't know if I really want to sit down and watch it again. I
thought that like A Star Is Born. See, that's one that I just remember the way that movie starts, where it just sort of like propels you into the action like so quickly. And like, I don't know. And like the sort of Lady Gaga scenes, like it is about a star being born and like his willingness to share the spotlight with somebody who is going to steal the spotlight from him. Like nobody watches the movie and thinks that, oh my God, Bradley Cooper was the best part of that movie. Like, and I think that that's why that was a more successful movie, is because I do believe that he could be a good director based on how he directed Gaga in that.
Maybe, who knows?
Because Lady Gaga is insane. I'm a huge fan.
She's so great. Yeah.
And like to sort of ground her, but also like give her a little bit of flavor in that. I don't know. I mean, it's a testament to her as well. But like she spent that entire press cycle being like, there are 99 people in a room and only one needs to believe in you.
I forgot about that quote. Well, let's talk real quick about actor in a supporting role. Sterling K. Brown, American Fiction, Robert De Niro, Killers of the Flower Moon, Robert Downey Jr. in Oppenheimer, probably going to get it. Ryan Gosling, Barbie, and Mark Ruffalo, Poor Things.
Poor Things. I'm a Poor Things stan.
Yeah.
I think Mark Ruffalo, like, so funny in that.
Oh, yeah.
So daring, so fun. I wish that he had a chance. I don't think he has any chance. I think Robert Downey Jr., he honestly, like, when I left Oppenheimer, like, I left so assured. Leaving the movie in July before seeing anything else, I was like, okay, I feel like Robert Downey Jr. is going to win Best Supporting Actor for this. It is just such a role that is so different from like the other things that he's done. And it's also like, I don't know how to say this. I'm like, oh, it's like weird seeing him. I'm like, you're officially in your elder era of prestige acting as this sort of like man of a certain age. And it suits him really well. Wow, I didn't realize that like you had this in you. And I guess I'm like not really familiar with like Robert Downey Jr. pre-Iron Man. I just don't know him that well enough. And I think that like a lot of us don't realize how much of a career arc he had before that. But yeah, I mean, I think that like he'll win. I think that it's deserved enough. Like, I can't be mad at it. It would have been nice if Ruffalo had more of a chance. And I just have to say, I don't know if I think Ryan Gosling deserves to be here or not, but I don't think he deserves to be in Best Supporting Actor because he is an actor. Like he did not give a supporting performance. Ken is a lead in that movie, and you cannot convince me otherwise.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a weird.
That feels like category fraud.
It was a weird twist. It was
category fraud. I'm calling it.
And I don't think he'll win. I think you're right. Downey Jr. has to win. I mean, the fact that he was nominated for Chaplin in 1992, and then Jail and everything else afterwards.
Yeah.
And then all we've seen now is Iron Man. And I think the only movie I can remember him outside of that is Zodiac and The Judge, where he's done something a little more serious than The Judge. Who remembers that movie? Zodiac, he's good, but he's not Jake Gyllenhaal or Mark Ruffalo.
Yeah.
And then after he finished the final Avengers, he was doing that weird Dr. Dolittle, some weird Disney movie with a bunch of animals.
He did do Dolittle, didn't he?
Oh, it was do Dolittle, yeah. I've loved what he and his wife have done as far as like production. I really like Perry Mason. I don't think it's perfect, but I like where they're going with it. So it's fun to see him in a different role now. He's kind of got his producing hat on, maybe doing a little directing soon. And instead, he really steals the show at a lot of moments in Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
He's doing a great job. And it's not just that we've forgotten he can act outside of Iron Man, but he's gruff, he's good, and he's a great bad guy. So
yeah,
I hope he wins. Past that, yeah, I mean, Ruffalo would be fantastic. I think Sterling K. Brown was good in American Fiction. I don't think he had enough screen time in my book to really win the Oscar for supporting role.
Yeah, and I also feel like, if anything, like American Fiction was like, I watched that and I saw his scenes and I'm like, man, he needs to be the lead actor in something and have his really like meaty like lead actor role that he can win an Oscar for.
Yeah, he was in some movie with Blake Lively, The Rhythm Section, a few years ago. Action movie. Not a great movie. But he stole the show in that. Man, he's such a good actor. And then watching him here again, the same thing. I'm like, why wasn't he starring in a movie, not just like American Fiction, but anything else? Something with a little more emotion and heart where he can show that range off, because he does have some pretty great range.
Yeah.
As far as actress in supporting role, Emily Blunt Oppenheimer, Danielle Brooks, Color Purple, America Ferrera, Barbie, Jodie Foster, Nyad, Divine Joy Randolph, The Holdovers. Divine's been winning. Do you think she's going to win this one too, or do you think it'll switch to somebody else?
I think this is an absolute lock for her. I would be shocked if anyone else wins. I think the only person who has a chance is Jodie Foster, for the same reason that Annette Bening is nominated. I think that Jodie Foster has that sort of Hollywood legend status, and she gives a performance in Nyad that is strong enough where it's like, okay, this is one of the best performances, and it's from Jodie Foster. Like, maybe we throw it to her. But I also think that Divine Joy Randolph, To be completely honest, acknowledging that I am a white guy with an opinion, I think that Octavia Spencer in The Help, there is a certain kind of role that the Black women in the supporting actress category find themselves having the most success getting nominated with, this emotional core helper servant thing. And I think that Divine Joy Randolph is fabulous in this movie. I think that her scenes, especially when she's visiting her family and giving the sort of empty box of baby things to her sister, there's just like a very sweet tenderness in there. I also think too that like in the same way that I hope that Lily, we see so much more of her, that like Divine Joy Randolph gets rewarded for this performance, but that she also has like she's able to show her full capabilities even more in like future films, and that she can get rewarded for their performances as well.
Yeah, she was fun because I think I've only seen her in comedies before this. Like she was in Lost City, and then she's been on Only Murders in the Building, and so to see her in this role was great. It's funny what you were mentioning with The Help and kind of what the Oscars expect from a Black female actress in a supporting role, going all the way back to Gone with the Wind, of Hattie McDaniel being the first African American to be nominated and to win the Oscar for Best Supporting. It almost feels like that's the expectation 80 years later, still carried on, of this is what you're supposed to do if you're in Best Supporting. Here you go.
Yeah. And it's like, I don't say that to diminish what she's doing in the role. And I don't say it to diminish the movie either. But that feels like a Best Supporting Actress performance. And I think she's a Tony Award winning like theater actor as well. Like she has like a really impressive like resume. And like I admit that I didn't even realize that she was in Only Murders in the Building, because her character in that is so different, where I was like, wow, you really like stepped into a very different kind of performance. And then even just seeing her campaign and like the way that she has just absolutely really turned it out fashion wise, like in all these press events, I'm like, ooh, you are such an exciting person. And like, I would love to see you take on something totally different. And I would love to see you take on a role where it is in the present. Like, I would love to see her take on a present day character in a movie and like see like her take on that. Because I think that there is something very contemporary about her in like her performance is so true to the era. It feels so like of that time, which I mean, that's kind of the point of that movie, is to like feel like a relic of that day and age of the Vietnam era. And she's so good at it that you just think like, oh, you're just going to be this sort of old timey actor as well. But I'm like, oh, you are like you're a modern actor with modern sensibilities and very up to date taste.
Yeah, the first thing I saw her in was 2018. I saw a pre-screen of Dolomite Is My Name, and I was like, who's that?
Yeah.
Because she's great in it, alongside Eddie Murphy, who's this new actress, not realizing, like you're saying, she was nominated for a Tony in 2012 for Ghost. But yeah, I would love to see her in something that wasn't Lost City or Only Murders, that is, because she has such good range, and she's just such a good emotional actor and dramatic actor, as well as has such good comedic talent.
Yeah. And, you know, I will say too, Danielle Brooks, I don't think she has any shot of winning, but I mean, she really was a scene stealer in The Color Purple, and she does not have that much screen time in that movie, and she really makes the most of it. So I'm very glad to see that she was nominated. And The Color Purple, like, I think that there were some issues in my mind how it was staged, where it didn't really hit its climaxes with the production. And I think that hurt its sort of overall chances of like getting those larger nominations. But I do have to say that like there are some excellent performances in there from the whole cast. I had a great time. Even if I don't think that it was an immediate Oscar winner, I thought it was really worth the watch. And I'm embarrassed that I haven't read the book, but I really need to go back and read the book now.
Have you watched the old movie?
I haven't. I saw it with my cousin, in New York, and like I had mentioned that I like hadn't seen the original, and she was sort of like, ooh, like that is a blind spot. Like she was like, I felt so embarrassed for like admitting it. She was like, you have to watch it. It's weird to think that Steven Spielberg directed it. That's such a weird thing. Obviously, again, just a white guy with an opinion, but like speaking to, friends, friends who like grew up in the States who like are Black. It is such a staple. Everyone sees it. You know what I mean? If you're a Black person in America, you would go, and in The Color Purple would just be like, oh, it's just one of those movies that's part of the film language in a way that The Wizard of Oz is, or Jurassic Park is. Like, it is such an important piece of cinema to so many people.
That is one that I definitely want to rewatch.
It's interesting too, because like I know it was quite divisive when it came out. Like James Baldwin was pretty critical of it. And The Color Purple, the story is really hard to adapt. Like, it is a very tough story about really tough themes. And I think that there is some smoothing over of the hard edges in the musical adaptation, which like, especially with Coleman Domingo's character, his character is such a bad guy, and he sort of gets a redemption that doesn't feel deserved in the adaptation of the musical, at least that I saw. And I wonder if that is part of why I'm like, no, there's just something not quite right about this. Like, it's good enough, but I really want to read how the book handled this.
Well, and that takes us to the next couple categories as far as writing for adapted screenplay versus original screenplay and how that played out on screen. Adapted has American Fiction, Barbie, Oppenheimer, Poor Things, and Zone of Interest.
Okay,
How does
so
Barbie lose? This is the one for it to lose, right?
I do think Barbie loses. Well, I actually don't know. I guess like, what is the criteria here? Which is the best screenplay that is adapted from the source material, or which writer did the best job of adapting the source material into a movie?
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense, but I think that, like, for instance, Killers of the Flower Moon has a really interesting story in this category, because the first draft of the movie like was very true to the book, and then they realized, especially after they had figured out that Lily was going to play the lead, and then realized that it was very heavy on like Jesse Plemons' character and the sort of birth of the FBI, but there just wasn't enough of like the sort of Native American indigenous story representative. So they like totally rewrote it, and it's such a better movie because of that. So for me, I'm like, that's like an interesting adaptation of the source material, where your adaptation has added on to the source material in a way that is really interesting and like worthy of being awarded.
Yeah. And now that one's not even nominated, sadly.
That is insane that it's not.
Yeah.
That is the biggest snub. That's crazy. I think where Barbie could struggle is because it initially was in the original screenplay, and then it got recategorized in the adapted. And I do think it's hard to assess it compared to the other stories, because it is an original story about a character. Like, I'm like, what is like adapted from? I'm like, okay, well, can I compare it to the original? No. Like, am I just supposed to like go to the toy aisle and like look at a Barbie? Like, what am I supposed to do? So like, I don't know. I just find that really weird, where like, I know that like Barbie is a creation, so like it is adapted from a different creation, but it does feel like, okay, then if you did a biopic but wrote an original screenplay about a person, would that be like adapted because you're adapting from their life? For me, I just don't really buy that it is an adapted screenplay. I think it should have been able to stay in the original screenplay category.
Yeah.
And does it deserve the Oscars? I don't know. I don't know who really deserves it here.
Well, in fact, let's just open up the original screenplay, because that connects to what you're just talking about. Because Anatomy of Fall, The Holdovers, but then Maestro, based on Leonard Bernstein's life, or a portion of it, May December, which is kind of sort of based on true experiences, but it's not exactly their story. And then
May December to me was like the biggest one that I was just surprised at how little awards love it was getting. I saw it at the London Film Festival, not knowing anything about it, left, and that was a movie when I had to wait a really long time before it went on Netflix and everyone was watching it. And the number of things that like people picked up on in like their watches and rewatches about even how Natalie Portman's character started mimicking Julianne Moore's characters would say like precisely. And then Natalie Portman's character would start saying that too. Like these small details that I just didn't even pick up in the original viewing, to me, really, that was the movie that rose in my personal rankings the most, where I was like, I really didn't give this movie enough credit when I first saw it. And the conversation that it generated was really interesting to me. And I think that a lot of that is in the acting, but I think it is really in the screenplay. And Charles Melton, I think he should have gotten Ryan Gosling's nomination for Best Supporting Actor. In my opinion, like, I think Ryan Gosling is a great actor and he's been awarded already. I would have loved to have seen Charles Melton get nominated for that. And I love camp. I love melodrama.
Yeah.
I thought it was a really great movie. I thought it was really interesting how it was directed, how it was written. But what do I actually think will win? Is Oppenheimer nominated and adapted?
It's adapted, yeah.
You know what? I think that's where American Fiction will win.
Oh, I could see that, yeah.
I could see an American Fiction sort of like getting a little bit of love in this category. Otherwise, I would say it's going to go to Oppenheimer. I just kind of think Oppenheimer is going to thing. And then I think Anatomy of a Fall, I kind of think might be the original.
That's the one I think is going to win the original, yeah. And because, I mean, Holdovers, I think, will win other places. Maestro, I don't think.
I don't know I actually don't know if the Holdovers is going to like win. I think that Oppenheimer is kind of going to like sweep a lot.
Yeah.
A lot more than we realize. One thing that I did hear that somebody was saying, they were like, it's weird to think that Zone of Interest was nominated for adapted?
Adapted, yeah.
They're like, it's weird that Zone of Interest was nominated for adapted screenplay because like the movie itself is very sparse. Like there's not much dialogue. Like it's very banal. Like it's about the banality of evil and it's a very banal thing. But somebody was saying that they read the screenplay and the screenplay is gorgeous. Like it is gorgeously written and it is so clear that the final execution is like the screenplay is very much an instruction manual for the film so I could see that being a spoiler in this. These both feel pretty wide open.
Yeah, I mean, Past Lives isn't nominated in many other places. I don't know if it would win for original screenplay.
Yeah, I love Past Lives. I think Past Lives was one of my favorite movies of the year. I don't think it's an Oscar movie. Like, I just don't. I think that it benefited from the actors' strikes because it came out before all that went down. So while none of these movies could really start their Oscar campaigns in earnest, more and more people were discovering Past Lives, and Greta Lee should have been nominated for Best Actress. I don't know who I would have bumped, but it's a shame that she wasn't. It's a shame that she wasn't nominated for that. I think it is such a good story. I think it is so well done. And I was watching an interview with Celine Song, and she was talking about how a challenge of this movie is that there is no bad guy.
Yeah.
There is no antagonist at all in the movie. Everyone is going into it with like the best of intentions. Even in Naiad, what is the antagonist? There is at least like an idea of like a thing to be overcome. Like in Past Lives, there's really nothing that they're really overcoming. They're just sort of like reconciling and going through and to be successful as it is without that primary obstacle. I'm like, it is so hard to think of a movie that moved me as much as that without it having that like obvious thrust of a thing to root against.
You're right, because her husband sits down with her in bed and he's like, am I the problem?
Yeah.
It's such a different look rather than it could have gone in a more antagonistic way. But you're right. The antagonist is time or regret or FOMO or whatever else you want to call it.
Yeah.
I know there's a couple like prediction websites. I know they predict Holdovers to win for Best Original. And for Adapted, they put Oppenheimer at the top still. Then Poor Things, which I could see, but
I could see anything winning. Anything could win and I wouldn't be surprised.
As far as director, I think this one is one of the sadder locks. Not sad, but it's less exciting. It has to be Christopher Nolan.
I guess. Like
Anatomy of Fall, Justine Triet, Killers of the Flower Moon, Scorsese, Poor Things, Yorgos, Zone of Interest, Jonathan Glazer, and then Oppenheimer, Christopher Nolan. If
we're going to talk about Oscar subs, it's too bad that Greta Gerwig wasn't nominated. When I saw Wonka, my review of Wonka was basically Greta Gerwig was snubbed because it just made you appreciate all of the choices she made in Barbie so much more. Yeah. When you see someone try to capture the vibrancy of like an old Hollywood movie. And that's what I think really, really worked about Barbie is just like, it felt like they just don't make movies like that anymore.
No. It was fun listening to Werner Herzog. I love all of his commentary on pop culture. But he said it was a masterful direction to take the audience and put them into like a pink living hell immediately. No choice, no difference, and wondering about yourself. It transported you somewhere else. Even if the story wasn't perfect, even if not everything landed in the entire movie, it was good overall as a complete package. And the choices she made and how she shot things and the set design, it's hard to not put her in that category. When Martin Scorsese did a great job with Killers of the Flower Moon, I loved that movie. He did way better than The Irishman, but I just wish there was more room because I think she should have been in there.
Yeah. I think Killers of the Flower Moon, of the nominees, I think that's the one that probably is the most deserving. Justice for Greta, I guess.
I'm glad the box office is injustice, but
yeah, right. Like I'm like proving. I go back to what I said before, though. Greta does not need the validation of this. Yeah. That being said, I do think that like the best director category, it's a boys' club, and I think it's frustrating that it's treated like there can only be like one woman nominated at a time. Still,
yes. Like who directed The Hurt Locker? I forget her name.
Catherine Bigelow.
Catherine Bigelow, fantastic director, but you're right. It's always one in there. And it's sad because among her peers, you hear a lot of people talking, but then when you see she's not nominated, okay. You can talk about how great of a director she is, and then she's not nominated in this category.
Yeah, I don't know. What other categories do we have?
So before Best Picture, we have everything from cinematography, costume design, film editing, makeup and hairstyle, production design, score, song, sound, visual effects, animated feature, documentary feature.
Oh, yeah, animated feature. So what's nominated for animated? Boy and the Heron and...
Boy and the Heron, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, Elemental, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Suzume, Chicken Run 2.
I think it's either going to be Boy and the Heron or Spider-Man.
Yeah.
I kind of think they're going to give it to the Spider-Man, which I don't necessarily disagree with. I'm a Miyazaki stan. I grew up with My Neighbor Totoro. He is someone who was present in my childhood. I know some people are discovering him as adults. And I do think that The Boy and the Heron is a gorgeous movie, but it's not super accessible. I feel like other of his films are more Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle are like more appropriate Best Animated Feature winners for me. Although I do think that it's not just the story, it's the animation. And the animation is just gorgeous.
Yeah.
I mean, he's the GOAT. So like if he wins, it would be very well deserved and I'd be very happy. It is something interesting to me. Like, I do think when there are animated films that are as good as the Spider-Verse movie and Boy and the Heron, what do these films have to do to get nominations outside of Best Animated? Like, when are we going to get Best Picture? Like Beauty and the Beast. Like, when was the last time an animated feature was? I guess Avatar kind of counts.
They would argue with you on that, but yeah, I mean, there's so much of it is CGI and computer generated.
It does feel like there's not enough consideration of animated films.
So Beauty and the Beast, 1991, Up in 2009, and then Toy Story 3 were the last 3 Best Picture nominations that were animated.
Is Elemental a Pixar movie?
Yes.
I feel like there was a time when, like, if Pixar had a movie out, it was pretty much the lock for Best Animated Feature. And it feels like Elemental doesn't have a chance.
No.
I don't know. Pixar has not really been batting 100 in the way that like we know that they have in the past.
I feel like with the Disney purchase, and then we saw during COVID how they fumbled and every Pixar movie went direct to streaming. I know Sony is doing a great job with Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. It was good and it was really fun. It was still great. And amazing animation.
Yeah, I watched the first one on an airplane. I watched the second one on an airplane because the animation style is so dynamic. I'm not bored, but I'm almost stimulated by this movie where like these crazy things happening, I'm immune to them because it's like a sensory overload. But when the reveal of the fate destiny twist comes out, I was like, wow, it just felt like really powerful storytelling to me in a way that I don't need to see the third movie for this to feel like a worthwhile viewing experience.
Yeah, you're right. The emotional tones towards the end of this movie were really great, and the questions there. Did you see all the documentaries this year, or some of them?
I haven't seen like any of them, so I can't really
Okay.
speak to that one.
I did go see 20 Days of Mariupol with a director at a screening a couple weeks ago. In my mind, there's no way this doesn't win because it's just so present and it's so intense. I've never seen so many. It just shows you it all, where it really made me feel sick and like affected for days afterwards. So I think that has to win, especially with what's going on in Ukraine right now.
Yeah.
Don't know what else would take that category. Past that, VFX, I hope Godzilla wins, but it's probably going to be Guardians of the Galaxy or Creator. It'd be cool if Poor Things won.
Yeah, effects and editing things. I feel like there's like a lot of categories that I'm like, it's either going to be Barbie or Poor Things. And like whichever one, and we're going to know like whichever one wins the first one is going to win the rest.
Yeah.
And then I feel like Oppenheimer is going to win everything else.
I was going to say the prediction sites have almost every category Oppenheimer's in. They win all.
But like I actually heard a lot of people complaining when they saw Oppenheimer that they like couldn't hear it, that there was issues with like the mixing as it relates to like the dialogue. And it's interesting that was such a loud piece of criticism when the movie first came out. And it's interesting that seems like a non-issue now.
Oppenheimer, like most Nolan movies, why is the score so loud?
Is The Killer nominated for anything?
The Killer's nominated for sound.
That, to me, like, I didn't particularly like that movie, but like when I saw that, I was like, damn, that movie sounded great.
Let's talk about song for 2 seconds.
Okay. If Billie Eilish does not win, like, I will riot. Like, it is.
Crafty.
I think that What Was I Made For is the best movie soundtrack song of the 21st century so far. It is a perfect song, and it is so perfect for the movie, and it is like so rare for like a song to do like both of those. Like Shallow is great, but like Shallow is about a pop star. So like you just had to write like a great pop song. This is a movie that has to like functionally work about like a doll coming to terms with the reality, but also resonate about like the whole idea of Barbie as like Barbie's experiences in the real world, sort of like offering like a proxy of like the unrealistic pressures faced by women. I feel like that all captured in that song that is so simple, so straightforward, and so good. And I just like, I don't even think it's a competition. I am mad that people want I'm Just Ken to win. Like, I don't understand it. Like, it's fine, but it's corny. Yeah. It's like a funny song, but it's just like, it feels stupid that people are even having a conversation about that. This is the one that I have a strong opinion about. And I think that Billie Eilish will win. And I think that it'll be beyond deserved. And Phineas, of course.
I mean, when it comes on in the movie, that's the moment that got me the most emotional. Before the montage is when the song starts playing in Barbie. It's just so good. It does kill me that prediction-wise, I'm Just Ken is only a few points behind, because that is insane. It's a Weird Al song written by Mark Ronson.
I don't think that like a comedic song shouldn't be nominated, but I also just feel like I don't think that like Ryan Gosling is bad in Barbie. Like his job is to sort of play like the exemplar of white male mediocrity, and he does it well. We either need to give him props to his acting performance, or we need to give him props for the song. And I think that like he is more deserving as like the acting performance in general. Like it's not like this song really adds anything to his performance that he hadn't already done.
The fact they're performing it at the Oscars, that's your award. There you go. Perform at the Oscars. Everyone gets to laugh and they enjoy it. That's fun. The other song is nominated, Dance the Night Away by
Dua Lipa.
Is not going to win. But also, she's been all over the charts. It's been the most played song for months.
Like that's her reward. She wrote a hit. Yeah.
And the other ones are one from Color Purple, a song from the Flamin' Hot movie, the Hot Cheetos movie.
Oh, by Becky G.
Yeah. Yeah. And then what else do we have? A song from Past Lives, Flora and Son. I don't even remember what that is. And then a song from The Hunger Games. So it's.
Oh, I did like, is it the Olivia Rodrigo song?
I think so. The Can't Catch Me Now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was pretty good. I thought that the music in the Hunger Games movie was pretty good, considering that it's not a musical.
Well, we go to Best Picture.
I think it was a great year for movies, to be honest. Oppenheimer is going to win. It's fine. It's just kind of boring. Like, I just wish that like there was like it would be more exciting if it had won following a hotly contested race, but it just feels so far in the lead now that anything else would feel like such a major upset, and I would love to see it.
Like you said, Poor Thing's probably not going to win. Killers of the Flower Moon is my favorite Martin Scorsese movie of years. Don't think it's going to win.
I'm surprised. I am quite surprised that Killers of the Flower Moon has not. I thought that when that came out, that was going to dominate. I thought that was going to like knock Oppenheimer from its post.
Yeah.
As the awards. Like, it just feels like it is a really good movie and it has all the makings of a best picture, where it ties on a social justice sort of issue and like it has like a great auteur and all of these things, and like has like a sort of surprisingly performance from like an actor who like typically hasn't been recognized before in Lily Gladstone. I don't know if it's the box office. I don't know what it is that like is keeping it from, or how long the movie is. I don't know.
And I know, I mean, they go into Apple TV Plus recently, but maybe not recent enough for everyone to watch if they didn't go to the theaters. I will say the length, at least among friends and people I know, stopped a lot of them from going to the theaters. They were like, I just don't want to sit there for that long. But
then Oppenheimer is like 3 hours long too.
Yeah, I mean, and then Dune that's just come out is almost 3 hours, 2 hours 45. So
yeah,
who knows? Well, it's going to be interesting to watch. Again, not for us; it's really for the industry folks, but also it'll be fun to see what gets propped up and if that helps some of the smaller movies get watched by general audiences.
Yeah,
after the awards wrap up. What are you excited to see this year after we move on from Oscars?
I would say that I'm really excited to see some of these things that like were disrupted by the strikes. I'm really excited to see the Challengers, the Luca Guadagnino movie with Zendaya. Anne Hathaway is in like a new like movie musical, Mother Mary, I think it's called. I think it has Michaela Cole on it from I May Destroy You.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to more of that. I don't know. I think it might be a little bit of like, I think a lot of projects were delayed or postponed by the actor and writers strikes. So I'm curious to see like how that affects the year of movies ahead, because it feels like we might like run into a little bit of a gap with this is when the movies that should have been shot last summer would be coming out, but we just don't have them.
Yeah, I mean, because there's the box office movies. You've got Deadpool 3 coming out soon. Love Lies Bleeding, which is...
Oh, yeah. I'm seeing that soon.
That comes soon. Godzilla and Kong. Furiosa is in May.
Oh, yeah.
I know that one was a little delayed. Quiet Place Day 1. That comes out in June. And then you've got a couple more superhero movies. Beetlejuice 2. Joker 2 with Lady Gaga. Gladiator 2.
Yeah. I'm excited for that.
That'll be fun. Yeah. Gladiator 2 has gotten good chatter so far from other directors and people who have seen it in studio head. And I love Paul Mescal, so I can't be mad there. But that comes out all the way in November. So like to your point, there's going to be a big stretch between late June and November of we're going to be watching replays. I know IMAX has talked about putting all these different IMAX movies back in their screens. Go back to Tron Legacy.
Oh, yeah.
Interstellar or Gravity. Should we just put all these movies back up that were big years ago, because there's just not going to be much coming out?
I actually do think it's going to work out really well for Dune too.
Oh yeah.
I think they're going to really ride the wave of people being like, this is like the last blockbuster that we know of.
Yeah. Play for 24 weeks. I hope you enjoy the Oscars.
I hope you do too.
Well, watch good movies and we'll catch up again soon.
Yeah. Talk soon, Tristan.
Let's talk about Shōgun, Madison. Let's talk about Shōgun. What a show. We just barely off mic mentioned how this is not a show where you can have your phone out and like playing on your phone while you're also watching, because 80% of the dialogue is in Japanese. And if you're not either fluent in Japanese or reading the subtitles, you're not going to know what's going on.
I'll call myself out. I had my phone out looking at something during the second one, and I just had to completely rewatch the episode. Now, there is a dub, but please don't watch the dub. Just watch it. Watch it the way it should be watched.
A dub? Huh. Don't tempt me.
I think from what I heard from the show's creator, this is based on a book that is historical fiction set in a historical time period, 1600s Japan, moving into the Edo period, away from the kind of shogunate of years past, now that there are guns and the Portuguese are there and there's Catholicism. But it's such an interesting time because this fictionalized story could have been true. And so that's kind of how the show is pitched. And at least from what the show creators had said, you know, there's Game of Thrones, there's all these different epics out there, but we like one told to a Western audience from an Eastern perspective of let it be in Japanese, let it have Japanese writers who are rewriting and getting the dialogue right and people really checking it to make sure it's correct and get the period and the feeling and the culture correct so it doesn't feel like so many Hollywood things where we go, yeah, this is China, this is Japan, this is kind of generally
they're
Asian.
eating with chopsticks. They're Asian. I think I was watching some of the behind the scenes stuff and they had on like gestural coaches who could like coach the actors on how specific people, whether you were a maid or a samurai or, you know, a ruler, how you would move your body. And so just the level of detail and precision in history and just the details in the costuming and the set design and the buildings and the Zen gardens, you just believe that you're watching something that happened for reals. There's very little about this that where you're questioning your suspension of disbelief. You just are absorbed into Japan.
Yeah, I think one of the things that makes all these other period piece shows or fantasy shows so engaging is it draws you into the world with a level of detail and the set design and just the visuals and everything else, whether it be Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, Mad Men, Peaky Blinders. And this does it to such an extent where, I mean, I'm a huge fan of The Last Samurai. Love The Last Samurai. I'm a huge fan of Silence, Martin Scorsese's pick about Jesuits, you know, Christian missionaries in Japan. And this feels a step above both of those. Of, like you said, the gardens, getting everything right, the gestures, just watching people shuffle around. And it doesn't feel so forced or fictionalized or honestly like fetishized. It just feels like we are in the shoes of the barbarian pirate, Anjin. We are new to the culture and we're learning the whole time in media ray. We're getting caught up on the culture the same speed he is. Like, learn the words, learn to be respectful. You're in Japan.
Yeah, like it's not condescending to its audience in its presentation of like Japanese culture and stuff. And like condescending, I mean like it's not holding your hand.
Yeah.
While it's teaching you these things. You're just picking it up as you're watching it. I think as far as story goes, it's, you know, I think I'm learning, because this is historical fiction, I'm learning history while I'm watching it. And boy, colonialism, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
The way Christianity exported itself around the globe and just sought to the hubris of just dividing the globe up and saying we own this, having never set foot there, is just insane to me.
The craziness of the second episode towards the end says, what is this man saying? We could not split the heavens with China between us. Like, what is he saying? Split the earth. And then a refresher of, Spain and Portugal just took the map as they knew it, drew a line down the middle, is just the wildest thought, especially now, having traveled or just really understanding maps of Spain and Portugal are tiny.
Yeah.
I mean, they had colonies everywhere, but it's almost like if Rhode Island was taking all of South America and Massachusetts is taking all of Africa. It's just insane.
Yeah, and then the schism between Protestant Christianity and Catholic Christianity and kind of their place in the Japanese world. Like, you know, when we first encounter some of the monks and the friars there in Japan, like it's almost a breath of fresh air because it's like, oh, these people are speaking, I mean, they're in universe, they're speaking Portuguese, but they're speaking English so that we can understand them. Yeah. And it's a breath of fresh air because it's like, oh my gosh, these guys, well, I can understand these guys. And like, they're to translate. And like, you know, I'm latching on to that. But then by the end of episode 2, you're like, oh wait, these guys are here with maybe a little bit more nefarious purpose. And they're not necessarily these good guy Christian missionaries. I mean, maybe some of them are that, but they're certainly kind of hidden reason why some of them are there.
Yeah, it's acting as if the whole entire history of Christianity and Europe is not full of violence and action and power struggle coming to
Yeah.
and saying that that's how it was packaged and maybe sometimes still is.
Yeah, I was really struck by, I think in the first episode, the word savage is tossed around a lot by Europeans and by Japanese. And you're not really sure, in some contexts, you can tell that it's just kind of a degrading term that's being thrown around and it does not really deserve. But sometimes it is really deserved that people are behaving towards each other very savagely. And it doesn't matter what armor you're wearing. Savagery knows no nationality.
That's going to be your bumper sticker. Savagery knows no nationality. I find it interesting too, just the choice of actor. The main actor, our British visitor or savage or Anjin, pirate as they call him. His name is John Blackthorne. The actor's name is Cosmo Jarvis. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, this would have been Tom Hardy, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like he's just he's got the chops. He's really scruff, gruff, confident, and he plays the part well of like that British boat of merchants would have been a diverse cast. The ones who would have survived the storm would have been the rough, gruff, scary ones. And that's who he is. And I think he does a really good job of the Japanese are not exactly getting another saint or they're not getting, Joan of Arc landing on Japan, helping them to oust the Portuguese. This guy is a businessman who knows his way around the ocean and how to survive, but probably not a model citizen.
Yeah, no. And so I think two episodes in, I kind of have an idea, I guess, of like where the plot is headed. I think it certainly revolves around John Blackthorne and what he represents, I guess, and the information that he has in versus the Catholic Protestant schism and kind of what Europe's plans are for Japan. But I'm really excited to see more. All of the marketing is, this is the next Game of Thrones. But the thing about Game of Thrones is that like it was entirely set in a fantasy world, and fantasy worlds use certain things to like make commentary on our current world.
Yeah.
But this show, how it's so different from Game of Thrones is that like there's no magic here, there's no dragons. Like this is how people were to each other. This is how history happened. And I'm really excited to see that play out and also to see a really artistic and beautiful depiction of Japan that doesn't come from a Miyazaki movie, because I feel like you're right in kind of the West, when we make our movies, we are a little bit, maybe not condescending, but we use a lot of shorthands to kind of depict different cultures. And this is super not doing that. And to be able to get a window into a different culture, with a budget as big as this show had, I don't know what the budget is, but it's definitely bigger than, a movie studio out of Japan would make for itself. And to be able to kind of see the grand scale of this and the depth of storytelling is just, it's really fun. It's as a viewer to just sit there and watch it.
On Hulu, when you're clicking between the episodes, you can go over to the dubs. They also have a podcast section where you can listen and watch the podcast in Hulu, which blew my mind. I'd never seen that before.
That's
so
cool.
I was doing a little bit of that watching, and the director was saying it is a show about Japan in that time, while at the same time grappling with the current issues that we have about colonization, globalization, integration, everything from religion to culture to, the power struggle, bureaucracy. And I agree with you in some way. It's difficult to hear everyone call it Game of Thrones. And now that I've watched the first 2 episodes, I understand a little bit of maybe what they were trying to say, but I hate that that's always the standard because it's like, okay, let that be its own thing too. It is a story of a power struggle, but it doesn't mean it's Game of Thrones.
Let's remember how that show ended and how pitifully it ended.
It's not going to be like that this time. It's going to be a little different.
Yeah. I almost thought that it was shot on film, just with how rich it feels, but it's not. It's digital.
Darn. But it does feel rich. It looks beautiful. And I saw a tweet that was so true. It's almost like they came to the DP, and before the show started, they said, we want one thing done correctly: lighting. Because the lighting is on point. This is the first show in I don't know how many years where we can have a night scene where I'm not either pausing and raising my TV's brightness or closing every blind in the house or like putting on night vision goggles. They finally get it right again. Peter Jackson did Lord of the Rings, all the shows in the early 2000s. It's in recent years where everyone's like, let's make it so dark you can hardly tell what's happening. This bucks that trend. And like you said, it's not like a Miyazaki movie, but in the same kind of when they're marching Anjin, the prisoner, when they're marching him over the hills and you're seeing the harbor, and when one of the guys goes rappelling down a cliff, it is just so beautiful, and it looks like Japan should look from the eyes of someone who's been there, lived there, or loves it. It's just so pretty and well done.
Yeah, there's a lot of just care and love and attention that's gone into this, and you can just tell.
Yeah, there's a scene or a shot towards the end of episode 2 where after the prisoner has been brought into the plan by Yoshi Toranaga, where they take him over, they've asked him if he wants a bath, he says no, and he's just standing there inside of this palace room looking out towards the garden, and you can just tell the entire way they shot it in thirds of there's bright light, you can see how pretty it is, he's smelling himself, and that's the moment of like, oh, maybe I am the savage one. It's so meticulously clean and beautiful, and you're like, 1600s coming from muddy, refuse-laden streets in England, this must look like paradise when he starts to open his eyes.
Yeah, there's a scene before that where, you know, they're coming into the Osaka harbor, and the Portuguese man that our main guy Anjin is with is like, you know, you're used to thinking of the world as being savages, and that you know, England is the cream of the crop. He's like, go look out that window as we come into this harbor and see for yourself what you actually think.
Yeah,
see if these people are savages. And then, of course, it pans into this beautiful, you know, Japanese landscape in this harbor with these glistening buildings, and it just is like, you know, it's beautiful, and the effect is really profound as, you know, you get to see that as a viewer.
Yeah, and it's nice, I think, too, seeing another story like Last Samurai of someone who enters a culture, is resistant at first, and then understands respect, and it's a different attitude of, we don't have to replace, we don't have to change, no one has to cop to me. This is a matter of understanding and respecting and joining a different culture. And each time he's called out or, you know, does something improper, when talking to Toda Mariko, played by Anna Sawai, and she says, when you speak, do not speak out of turn. And when you speak to me, call me Toda Mariko Sami. You know, a sign of respect of like, she's above him in this house. He is a guest and a prisoner.
Yeah. And
yet, instead of being angry or whatever else, we see John Blackthorne kind of shake his head and repeat it and then realize, I'm in their house. I'm ready to get down with this. And I think as an audience, it was nice to settle into him. I'm ready to get down with this. Show me the rest of it. I want to see what happens next.
Yeah. And as a protagonist, like that's fun for me to watch, is having a protagonist who's not just going to be a bull in a china shop and just like enforce his way of the world onto others all the time, but someone who's teachable, who can learn, and who can actually like change the way that he is given the context. And I think that's a fun thing to watch in a protagonist.
I'm interested to see where the season goes, or where the series goes. And I'll definitely be going back and watching the 1980 miniseries, because this is another remake of a miniseries that's based on the original novel from 1980, and seeing how the world has changed and our perspective changes. Because I think that'll be pretty stark to see what they did then versus now. And I know it was still good and people really liked it when this was coming out. So I want to see what stayed true between the two versus what changed drastically.
Yeah. Well, you'll have to keep us posted on that.
Once I find it. Well, we have another episode coming out next Tuesday for those who have Hulu. 9 p.m. Pacific is episode 3. So we will recap episode 3 next week. And before then, we have another episode of Masters of the Air Debrief coming out. So enjoy the Oscars, and we'll catch you then.
Bye.